All right, so every day we're updating millions of data points. It's very important for us to keep our data fresh. And we're also constantly transferring data tables from production to development servers. So some of our data updating or freshness occurs on production servers, but some of it we pull it offline, and we perform those updates offline on development servers. So we're always moving data across servers. So this works well when it's working, but we experienced this period of time for a few weeks pretty regularly, and we saw this happening as a major pattern over months, where we noticed that we were pushing MySQL to its limit. And what we saw was we began facing frequent system backups. As our transferring data tables, they became mysteriously stuck in locked states. So what we would see is we're transferring a lot of tables across servers. So we have our MySQL process list, and we're looking at it, and we see, okay, this table is in this locked state. All right, it's taking a few minutes. Okay, it's taking a half hour. All right, now more tables are piling up. They're all locked, and none of them are being released. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to shut our whole system down or kill a bunch of processes and then just wait for everything to refresh. So as you can imagine, as an engineer, that means I have to interrupt the cool project I'm working on. I have to interrupt my sprint in order to handle this crisis. And we're not pushing as much data through as we want to be, and our data's not as fresh. So we have to solve this problem. So this problem is related to this often talked about, pretty poorly understood issue called system locking. So this is a process in MySQL called system lock. And it's kind of a little legend in our company. We see these locks, but we don't know much about them. There's not that much research on them. You can Google it and find out a little bit, but not enough to really solve the problem. So this was our first clue. We see these system locks, and we have to dig in and figure it out. So at a high level, data logistics is our process that we call it when we're moving data between servers. So when we're copying a table from one server to another, the process in MySQL, it's called transportable table spaces, and within that process, we've created a custom data logistics script for it. And within that process, the command flush tables with the table name for export is called. And this ensures that changes to the table are written to disk before that table is copied. So for instance, let's say you're an engineer or a product manager. You just updated data. So you got some new crime statistics data from the government, and you just updated your tables, and you're going to push it out. You might have all these updates that just recently occurred to that table. Those updates might currently be in memory and not on disk. So this method, flush tables for export, it's going to take those changes in memory and put them in the files on disk so that when they're copied, those changes are consistent. And what this does is it holds a system lock on the table during the flush. So it says, okay, lock this table. We're going to keep it in this state. We're not going to let anything happen to this table while we take this persistent copy and move it. And then we'll release the lock and more changes can be made. So we were specifically interested in these unreleased system locks on flush tables for export that were holding up our system and then required us to intervene. It's important to note that system locks are just a necessary and normal part of flush tables for export, but they just become a problem when they're not released. So high level, this is the problem we were facing. We had these system locks. They were piling up. They weren't released. Then our tables weren't transferring, so we just have to kill a bunch of processes, not only these table movement processes, but also all of our updates and inserts and deletes that were happening, all of our data transformation. We just have to kill it all and let the system refresh and then go from there. So that's not optimal. So we had to figure something out. And just so that you can see what this looks like in the process list, so we have this system lock. It's been running for 376 seconds on flush table test app for export. And I'll let you know this table app is completely empty. It should take 0.2 milliseconds to flush. And we were seeing these problems when this is in our test environment. This 0.2 millisecond flush table that it should take was taking, it will just run indefinitely. And what we were seeing with big tables is they would be sitting in the state for 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, and that's unacceptable. All right, so fortunately we found a clue. So in MySQL, you can run the command show engine InnoDB status if MySQL is using InnoDB as its storage engine, which it is by default. And it's just a lot of information about what's happening. And we crawled through, and what one of our engineers noticed is that every time we had these long-running system locks, this iBuff, it's this data structure, this iBuff had a very large size, had a lot of pages in the iBuff. And as soon as the system lock was released, we noticed that the iBuff was also emptied. So as the system lock, it would start counting down, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 number of pages in the data structure. And as soon as the system lock was released, we would also notice it corresponded with the iBuff being empty. So that was a clue that we had to dig in. So what's the iBuff? So it's a data structure. The formal name is the change buffer. It used to be called the insert buffer, and what InnoDB and MySQL did is they not only want to buffer inserts, but also updates and deletes. So all changes to a table, right? So it's called the change buffer. And I'll go into it more. But it's affectionately and in the code base called the iBuff. All right, so we want to explore this connection, flush tables for export, and the change buffer so that we can figure out this system locking issue. So I'm going to show you a little bit, SystemBot session 1, demonstrating flush tables for export